And welcome to your Nooner with me, Dave LaMont. Thank you very much for being with me on Facebook Live and eventually on YouTube. And I've got a wonderful guest standing by, and I'm not going to waste much time. I always like to look at Twitter to see if there's anything going on. And honestly, the most interesting thing is that Bob Stoops is going to take Urban Meyer's place on the Fox Sports college football pregame show. Interesting about that. I never saw Stoops as super media friendly, but I also pretty much knew that he was done with college football when he retired. Yeah, he had a little dalliance with, was it the XFL or whatever, but no, he's had it. He's had health issues. He was worried about all the stress that goes with college coaching. So you can stop naming him to the 7,000 different openings that come up every year in college football. I think this will probably be the job that he retires on. I'd be stunned if he ever would. And I was told by somebody way smarter than me, of which I realize there are many, and way more connected to Bob Stoops than I am, who said to me, no, he's done. That's the end of that. And when you have that kind of health scare, especially with your heart like Stoops did, it makes complete sense to walk away. One last item. I forgot it was All-Star Weekend in the NBA. I didn't see anything. And I like All-Star Weekend. Blanked out completely. Not sure why. I don't even have a good excuse, but I just did. I'm waking up this morning going, and the team, LeBron, I think it was, won the All-Star game. I went, oh. And Steph Curry won the three-point on the last shot of, oh, well, next year, I guess. The NBA goes in a hiatus, but you know what's starting to warm up? And this is the time of the year which we got robbed of last year. Spring training, baby, is back. And that means Todd Hollandsworth is employed with Fox Sports Florida. Todd, thank you so much for taking a minute or two.
Sure. Great to be with you, Dave.
Yeah, great to see you again. Todd, now we have a semblance of a normal spring training after what happened last year. So we'll dive right into what the Miami Marlins have. Where did this team, when you signed off for the last time last year, you say, okay, this team needs to get better. What areas do they need to get better at as we get ready for this season?
Well, it's a great question. I think we were left with a pretty good taste in our mouth with the Marlins making it to the postseason last year, putting up a winning record. It's pretty undeniable what happened. The transformation of this team was centered around the starting pitching and guys coming out of that bullpen and getting key outs really all the way down the stretch last year. Yes, in that shortened season, but it's who they are. I think that's who they want to be. And you go into the 2021 season thinking much of the same thing, hoping that some of these younger players, Sixto Sanchez's of the world, take a step forward because we know their stuff is elite. We know what they're capable of doing. Really, the only thing working against them is experience and not even their age, but just merely major league experience and how a 162-game season plays itself out. I think this offense will be a little bit better this year than it was last year. Last year was a step forward as well. Of course, we're still talking about a shortened season. So the true test of an organization, the true test of a team is depth. There's a 162-game season. There's no hiding. You can't. I mean, there's teams got away with things like, you know what I mean? Just because of COVID and everything going on, we're so grateful that they got back out on the field. But when you look at a 60-game season, it's a sprint. Baseball's never a sprint. It's always a marathon, and we're back to the marathon.
Well, you mentioned Sanchez, and I had him down here on my little list of names of people to talk about. We haven't seen anything from him yet. What's the latest on his availability?
Well, I think Sixto's going to, he's going to be in a good. You're pacing guys out right now. I think that's really what it comes down to. Spring training is a very interesting dynamic for guys, and some guys come in and for me, I'll speak from the player's side of things. I had spring trainings where I had 105 at bats. Now that's probably a little much, but as far as your preparation is concerned, managers engage their players, their starters, their starting staff. How is the best way to get you ready for the season so that we maximize who you are during the course of the season? And everybody's path is completely different. Some guys want more work. Some guys want less work, whatever it is to get themselves ready. So, it's always one of those things that I don't pay too much attention to. You kind of leave it on Don Mattingly, the relationships that are there internally, what they know they want and what the expectations are for the younger player are probably different than what everybody else expects. I think back a couple of seasons, I'll give you a great example. Myself included, we were blown away at what Sandy Alcantara had accomplished on the field, but how well he pitched down the stretch in a season where 29 out of 30 organizations were like, well, we got to shut our young guy down. He's at 155 innings. And, listen, there's not a whole lot for us to gain in September. And the Marlins, stepped up and were like, listen, we plan on being a playoff team here in the next few seasons. We need Sandy to be at the front of this. So Sandy's going to pitch all the way through September. We're not shutting him down. And in fact, Sandy's best run was at the end of the year. He piled on about another 30 innings, got so close to like 200 innings that year, the All-Star game 2019, and it was a massive step forward for the guy. So, I mean, that's the way that I see it, and sometimes we kind of maybe make too much out of, what spring training needs to be. Sandy knows what he needs to do to get ready. So does Sixto. But again, I think this is an organization that's ready to push and challenge younger players. And really, it does start in spring training. And I think the Marlins, hey, listen, they're off to a 4-1 start right now. They're playing great baseball in spring training, which a lot of times they do. But the point is that Don Mattingly gets his guys ready, and those veteran players that are going to be out there every day, they're already getting their at-bats.
Well, he said it in an article I read earlier today about pitching's our calling card. That's paraphrasing. You mentioned Alcantara. You mentioned Sanchez. Pablo Lopez is another guy. Hernandez, who came on strong. I mean, you can win. Unlike in football now, where you really can't win with defense anymore, at least in college football, you can win with pitching and defense in Major League Baseball. And the Marlins are well set there. Absolutely.
But the question will be ultimately the depth. How will that depth go? I mean, is it fair to say that we would look at all 4 or 5 of those guys if you want to throw Rogers in the mix? Because, again, he's a guy who, up eyes last year. Eliezer's done great things. But really, Sandy's the only one of the entire group that has a full Major League season under his belt and is proven from start to finish that he's that guy. We look at their ability, and we certainly look at what they bring to the table, and we think that of all of them. But the point merely is, yes, if we get to the end of 2021 season and all 5 of these guys have given us 150-plus innings, and you're saying, okay, well, first of all, that would be one of the top rotations in all of baseball. That I certainly believe that they can be that, but it would be a huge step forward when I think some people or most people are expecting a good step forward. It would be a leap. And so to see it that way is it's going to be a challenge. So you have to manage those guys wisely so that you get them from start to finish. Generally speaking, you look at a rotation of 5 guys that starts the season, and you'll end up using any good team, even most playoff teams will tell you, you'll end up using 8 guys in that starting rotation or 9 rotation. So again, it speaks back to the depth I'm talking about.
I love the Adam Duvall signing for the outfield. I used to play Stratomatic, and my last year of playing, I had his card, and I was really proud of myself for having it. So I know he can pop.
Right.
And that's one thing this team, other than Brian Anderson, you don't have a guy who in that lineup has that kind of explosive power. And I thought bringing Duvall in was just a beautiful thing to help make this lineup a little tougher.
Right. He's got a great little track record going. And I think kind of past the downswing that he had. I mean, he ended up in Atlanta a few years ago off of a couple of great seasons in Cincinnati. And everybody was like, this guy, he's the 30-100 guy. Tremendous power to all fields, good idea what he's doing at the plate. But he fell on hard times. I mean, hitters in this game, it happens to him all the time. Basically was a backup player for Atlanta to start. Then it evolved. He turned into a major force for him. And I think the Braves would even tell you last year, I don't know if we win as many games as we did or end up where we did without Duvall, because he was a huge part of it. And a lot of that damage. Well, let me put it this way. The Marlins got better by acquiring him because they don't feel for them anymore. My goodness, did that man put up some numbers against the Marlins last year, a couple of big grand slams. I believe there was the 3-homer game. I have this ability to black out stuff in my memory I don't like. I think Duvall is a huge signing. He had some huge games against us last year, and he's very comfortable in Marlins Park, which is always a good sign because most hitters aren't terribly comfortable in the park.
Now, by the way, I didn't have your card. Somebody always had it, and you never got traded that I can remember, so don't take it personally.
It's all good.
It's all good. Another name that is really intriguing is Jazz Chisholm, who opens, boom. I believe it was his first at bat. He hits one out in the spring. Battle for second base this year for him, and then maybe you move over?
Well, and I think the situation with Jazz, I mean, you've got Isan Diaz at second base right now, slotted in. Of course, Rojas is at short. I don't want to say that they're like players, but they're both left-handed hitting guys who play second base. And, it's one of those situations where it would be hard for me to really envision a platoon, although, I mean, I suppose it's possible. And again, I'm not the manager of the team. You're just you and me talking right now and listening, right? So, you look at what Jazz has done. He has opened up some eyes last year, which, again, the talent is undeniable. So is the power. So is Isan. But last year was, obviously COVID and all sorts of things going on different. Everybody got, dealt with this differently and personally. I don't know if there's a clear front runner right now, but I know that both of them are very hungry. Isan hit a triple yesterday. Jazz hit the home run that you mentioned. So maybe there is a little internal competition. I've always been a firm believer. Now that I'm on the other side, on the broadcasting side of it, I love talking about internal competition. I hated it when I was a player. You're always dealing with it. We talk about this stuff all the time because we always think the competition's on the other side of the field. But the reality is, more times than not, when you're a guy who's trying to establish himself, sometimes your competition's your best friend. It's the guy you're taking fly balls with at 11:30 in the morning, next to you. Those are the guys that you're trying to boat race to the big leagues and nail that starting job. So I think both these guys are really, really good players. I know that they both have bright futures. I know that both are opening up eyes. So to answer your question, it's way too early to kind of peg that one, but you're right. Mm-hmm. Has opened some eyes with some long home runs. He's revamped his swing. It's a little bit more under control this year. He had a few more moving parts last year, and I thought so. He did a nice job kind of cleaning that up this winter, and so far so good.
First base. I mean, you got a couple of guys there. Is that a platoonable? It's a new word I just made up. Position there.
I think that it is. I think that you've got the potential to do some things with some of the bigger guys. I mean, Aguilar certainly is going to be out there the most of the time. You've got Cooper. You've got to slot him in some way. You've got to find a way. Yeah. For the first time in the last few seasons, I really feel like there is some offensive depth in this lineup. It's not like, I feel like Don Mattingly at times would have to kind of run out the A guys every day and kind of
every day
run the risk of burning guys out because, all 80 of your guys, are playing 162 ball games. You love to have one or two of those guys. We call them, the staple guys or the pillar guys that are, the rocks in the lineup that are going to be there for 162. But to envision an entire team, much like that starting rotation, if you think you're going to run 8 guys out there and you're not going to bump into an injury, you're kidding yourself. Somebody's going to get hurt. Something's going to happen. So to have that organizational depth is really, really a plus. And I think that we have more this year than we had last year. When it comes to the offensive side of things, you've got guys vying for at-bats. I remember I had some of my best seasons when I knew I was hungry to get at-bats. I had a couple of years where after being an everyday player for about the first 8 or 9 years of my career, I was transitioning into that fourth outfielder role. And you realize that if you want to get at bats, you better perform. I mean, you got to go out there and get it done. And your window is so much smaller because you may only get a start. You may only get 2 starts in a game, and that's even in the National League. The American League, it's way worse. So, that's what you really have to key in on. And it kind of keeps your players hungry. I've always been a big fan of that. So to that point, you do have the depth at first base. You've got some homer potential at first base. You've got Cooper, Aguilar. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. Lewin Diaz has been playing pretty good ball too. He's swinging the hot bat right now. So good to see him getting off to a good start in spring training. You're getting to the point where the organizational depth is starting to produce.
How did you handle that? I mean, when you had that competition, how did you avoid pressing and then thereby putting even more pressure on yourself or maybe making mistakes?
Well, you just really have to kind of internalize what's going on. You realize when I was in the minor leagues, and I was very, very blessed to have a lot of quality human beings and quality guys around me in the minor leagues when I was with the Dodgers coming up in the early 90s. And, I learned a lot of lessons. I mean, I was an 18-year-old drafted out of high school, and, you start to realize, things you pick up on them. And, a lot of that advice that was given to me back then, I live with today. I certainly stand by it. And you realize that the competition is in the room more than it is across the field. Of course, across the field is the vehicle to compete. But the guys that you're competing with when it comes to your job and, your success and your opportunity and your playing time are the guys that you're sitting next to. And it's a very interesting dynamic because in many instances, they're your best friends. You're around each other 16 hours a day. You travel together, for 6 months. You eat, sleep, and breathe the same air. I mean, you do all of these things together with these guys, and yet you're competing with them on a daily basis. To not only win baseball games with them as your teammates, but you're also competing against each other for playing time. I remember, I'll give you a quick story. And one of my dear friends, and this goes all the way back to my Marlins days back in 2003 with Derek Lee. And season, Derek and I left and went to Chicago. We both ended up there for the 2004 season with a lot of expectation. We thought that the Cubs were in a pretty good spot to get some things done. We had a good year that year, but I remember early on in that season. And so Dusty Baker was our manager at the time, and I loved Dusty, loved playing for him. Just a great human being. And of course, D. Lee is a very dear friend of mine. Still stay in touch with him. D was slotted to be our everyday first baseman and get 162 games, but he got off to a little bit of a slow start that year. And I came out roaring. I came out. I was making Mac. I had a huge spring training. I came out. I had a good start to the season. I think 3 of my first 4 hits on the year were home runs. So I just got off to a great start. And Dusty was like, "I got to get you in the lineup. I mean, you're as hot as you are. You got to play." And of course, we've got Corey Patterson, Sammy Sosa, Moises Alou. That's our outfield. And those guys are playing. He's like, "Listen, get your first baseman club. You're going to get a few reps at first base." And D and we butted heads a little bit. It was kind of an interesting dynamic, as good of friends as we were. Not that D got mad at me, and he certainly understood the chances, but Derek had lost a little bit of playing time just in the short term to me at that point of the season, just because I was swinging a very hot bat. He, of all of us, might have been swinging a little colder bat at that point of time. He went on and had a great season that year, of course. But you feel it, and it's a reflection of how this game works. And it's so much about not only the ability to play, but the relationships that you have and the ability to handle all the things that come your way during the course of a season, both on and off the field.
Yeah, all team sports is like that. When you were talking about that, the sleep, eat, breathe, I mean, you think about every team sport, that's exactly what's going on. You're sitting in a locker room, and right across from there is that guy, and maybe today you were better than that guy, but tomorrow you never know. And baseball, with that daily drama, every day is a new day. That's a really interesting way of looking at it. We've gone 15 minutes. Yeah, we went 15 minutes, and we haven't mentioned Brian Anderson's name yet, the classic corner infielder. That says something, because, a year or two ago, he might have been the lead story, but the way the organization has built depth, I mean, there's your 162 guy, right? Pretty much. Right.
I've gone out on a limb already telling some friends. I was just up in spring training a few days ago, and I think he's got a real good shot at getting to the All-Star game. It's probably a bold statement on my part. I'm okay with bold statements. I made them last year, but he to me is a young man who's really figuring it out. Hit a long home run to the opposite field. In fact, I think it was Friday of last week. It was a 1-0 ball game, the only run in the game, a long home run. I mean, this is a guy who just a few seasons ago, I continued to tell everybody that would listen, this guy will win a Gold Glove in right field. And they think so highly of him that he's not even the right fielder. He's the start. How motivated and talented this young man is. He's a big kid. He's strong. He's hungry. That to me is the thing that just impresses me the most. Sometimes in our sport, you watch the guys that get frustrated the most, and you end up believing in them the most, because they know that frustration will drive them. And that is, to me, who Brian Anderson is. Even when he's having his moments at the plate, you can see in his eyes that it doesn't eat at him in a way. It eats at him in a way that it makes him better. And that, to me, is ultimately what this guy is all about. It's what he's always been about. And he's a tremendous example for this organization and the younger kids who are looking up to the big league level right now of what you want to be and how you want to handle your business. This guy's going to win a Gold Glove in right field or at third base. He's going to play third base most of the time anymore. But he was a Gold Glove right fielder as far as I ever remember. And his hitting skills are just fantastic, right? He really just has learned to go to the other way, and how much power he's got the other way as well.
One more question on the Marlins, and I want to hit the National League a little bit with you. Your great starting pitching can be undone if the bullpen can't take care of its end. How does this bullpen shape up?
Well, I think the acquisition of Bass is certainly going to be a big one. There's definitely power arms down there, and there's depth. There's not as much experience, and that's it. But I guess between Mel Stoudemire and Donnie and figuring things out, they've done a fantastic job of doing just that. They've come up with answers that I don't think people were expecting, and those answers are getting the job done. To me, it's more of a group effort than it is kind of the individuals just saying, "Hey, let's get the ball to player X at the end."
Yeah.
I think there's more answers than that with this bullpen. Like I said, there's plenty of velocity, but at the same time, experience is going to be the key. And you're right. I mean, that always ends up being the X factor, because even if you go back and look at exactly how last year broke itself down, there were games that there would have been a lot of offense, but it always seemed to be, even last year, that if there would be a lot of offense on both sides.
Yeah.
A lot of the wins last year for the Marlins were close ball games nailed down by a bullpen that got the job done. Maybe an unexpected performance from the group on the whole. The Marlins are absolutely going to need that again, and of course that gets tested over 162 games differently than a 60 games. So, maybe the ability, and of course we haven't seen this yet from the Marlins, and Marlins fans are probably waiting as much as anybody to see it. The ability to acquire talent when it's needed. And what I mean by that is, if the Marlins can hang around, kind of like, players think this way. And it's a very interesting dynamic. We used to talk about this stuff in the clubhouse all the time. Let's see how much pressure we can put on the front office to get us the help that we need by putting ourselves in position to matter down at the end of the season. And if the Marlins can do that, the players can do that, I think Derek Jeter and company will take that with open arms, Kim Ng, and they would be thrilled to know that this team and this group is in it with the idea that they need a little help in the bullpen and we need to go get some answers. Who do we use to go get those answers?
Well, you mentioned Ng. I mean, she's broken a barrier, and congratulations to the Marlins for doing that. She's going to be watched maybe as much as the product on the field to see what move she's going to make, right, depending on that scenario that you just talked about, see how aggressive she is and ultimately successful.
It's a great point. I think for the first time,
very unique situation.
Yeah, for the first time for me, this is my 5th year with the Marlins. For me, and even most people that I talk to have spoken to over the history of the Marlins, the Miami side of it anyway. Going back many years, we haven't gone into a season with the word expectation being applied to the Marlins. This is the first time in a long time where is legitimate based on what we saw last year. I mean, this is a team that in a 60-game stretch found themselves good enough to make the postseason. And, oh, by the way, went out and won a postseason series against the Chicago Cubs. That's no small feat. So, I mean, these guys got something done last year. They're hoping to build on that. And I hope Miami Marlins fans are buying into this and are ready to, start to support this team on a bigger level, like we're seeing with so many of the Florida teams. I mean, it's been a pretty good run for Florida here over COVID. That might be the only thing that we can say is good about COVID. COVID is somehow blessed sports franchises in the state of Florida because everybody seems to be doing or coming up with winning seasons or Stanley Cups or, heck, even winning the Super Bowl, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd live long enough to hear the term Champa Bay in my life, and yet here it is. Yep. So, that's all right. So the National League, it looks as if we're headed for a Dodgers-Padres NLCS. So who's going to screw that up?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if either one of them. such talented groups, and they're both deep. In these types of situations, and of course, this didn't happen to the Dodgers last year in any way. And again, 60 games is a different dynamic than 162 games. And so I'll leave it like this. I'm certain of my answer, but I don't know what answers your question. So what ends up happening typically in these types of matchups, and I think it's the greatest matchup in the National League right now. I think the National League East is a beast, but this matchup best is, in so many minds, it's so exciting because you have so many star players on both teams. And very rarely do we get that in baseball this way, where we already identify with the superstars on both teams. There's expectations with one. And, oh, by the way, they're just 60 or so miles apart in Southern California. So I'll say this. It won't be the games that these two teams play head to head. It will be the games that these teams play in must-win games, and it always ends up this way. You end up talking about it later down the road. How did the Dodgers do against the New York Mets? How did the Dodgers do against, say, the Atlanta Braves? Like those out of your league games where knowing things is not really at its best. You don't play them as much. You play them twice a year, home and home maybe. Same could be said for San Diego. So you end up like that's the joy of baseball. You end up rare these matchups that don't happen often. Those two teams are going to play each other 19 times, but then you're going to play 30 or so games against teams that you're going to see twice, and you don't know a whole lot about the East other than what you see on TV and other stuff. How you handle those games really will determine who wins that division and how that whole thing plays itself out. And I'm almost certain of that.
You mentioned the East. Atlanta could be the team that elbows somebody out of the way, but then the Mets have all these arms. I mean, you're right. If the Marlins make the noise you think they're going to make, I mean, is there a weak team in the East? Phillies, maybe? I don't even know.
It really isn't. I mean, you
No.
start. It is scary. It is scary up and down the East Coast right now. And you just look at these guys. I mean, you get number 3 starters that are throwing 100 miles an hour, number 3 starters throwing 100 miles an hour. So, yeah, there is so much talent. Atlanta's got young players. You got a Freddie Freeman. I mean, that whole thing that's going on there. Philly is, listen, the Marlins made up the big jump in the division against the Philadelphia Phillies, and they're no walk in the park. I mean, that's a very talented group as well. So, you look at what the Mets, and the Nationals, they're only a year removed from winning the World Series. So I know they had some issues last year, but it would be hard for me to believe that they didn't improve this year. But, you're going to look at the National League East and say, okay, well, everybody's going to win 92 games. It's not possible. You know what I mean? So that's not happening. So something's going to happen somewhere. Something's got to give. So it's going to be a real exciting year. And I think it's going to be, I really do believe it's going to be a pretty intense year. I think that there's going to be a lot of really, really, really good series.
And the American League, anybody? I mean, the Yankees seem to be, they've got everybody back. They brought LeMahieu back, which was easily the only thing they could have done. I don't even know why it took them as long as they did. He's been their best player the last couple of years. Anybody besides the Yankees that looks good to you there?
The Chicago White Sox certainly look like a team that is hungry and ready to make some moves, and they did make some moves. But again, to their playoff pedigree, they don't have much of one. So it's a great question. They're very much to me like the San Diego Padres. They're a fun team to watch. They're very, very exciting on paper. Even with guys who aren't quite as proven, they just come with great track records of who they were as minor leaguers. Some of these guys are getting opportunities, a lot of big arms, a lot of great personalities, and that. Of course, the La Russa dynamic is going to be so interesting to watch to see how that goes. But I think expectations are fair to say. I mean, I'm a Chicago.
Sure.
Lived in Chicago for almost 20 years. I covered the Cubs for a very, very long time. I may get in trouble for saying this out loud. It feels to me like expectations on the White Sox for the first long time are higher than they are on the Cubs. I mean, the Cubs parted with Yu Darvish, sent him to San Diego, and so maybe they're in a more of a transitional period. They do have some guys that we know who Chris Bryant is, and Anthony Rizzo, and Ferris, and those guys. They've got a good rotation. But I think that the expectations, as far as this year are concerned, are probably higher for the White Sox than they are for the Cubs, and that. I can't remember the last time I said that out loud.
Yeah, but you know what? They've done a nice job of slowly building that organization, and it might remind you of the team that you work with because it's been brick by brick. It wasn't some dramatic rip off the scab and start over kind of thing. They kind of did it, the way Oakland kind of did it that way. A few other teams done it that way. So I get it. And they've got some young studs. You're absolutely right. I wanted to ask the final thing before I let you go. You touched on this a little while ago, and it locked me in. You mentioned the marathon of the MLB season. You obviously were successful enough to go through quite a few of them. How do you maintain your energy, your focus, your enthusiasm for the game when you've been, day after day after day?
I think that I think back to my career, and you have to have a strong dynamic. Not only good work ethic, idea of what you want to accomplish that year, but you also have to have, just a great wife, somebody who encourages. And I did. My wife, Marcy, was nothing but just absolute encouragement all the time, even through the ups and the downs. I mean, there's so many days where, I guess maybe the right way to say it was I found it easier to play in the big leagues when I got married. I got married about halfway through my career, and she was part of the good, that dealing with the bad got more manageable. And I wasn't always good with that when I was single in the first half of my career at the major league level. I'd very much beat myself up over the head if I was going through rough times. If I was rolling, you think you're the greatest thing going. So it tends to go that way because fans kind of react that way to you. Of course, I was in LA for a very, very long time with a massive fan base.
Yep.
Had success in Los Angeles, had some down years in Los Angeles as well. So I got a little bit of everything. But to me, I guess the perfect answer is just having a rounded, inner circle that can pick you up and help you when things are bad, and certainly encourage you and push you when things are going good. They're always be very well aware. And I learned this again later on, that including them in the journey is vital. And for me was always such a big part of it. And, making sure that it wasn't like, hey, look at everybody, look what I've accomplished this week. I had a great week, I hit 3 home runs. No, it's also understanding that, the kids at home, my 2 older sons who were little boys at the time were, part of this, that she was part of it in trying to remember and maintain, that good family dynamic. And that always helped. And I see it more so today because there's just so much pressure on these guys. I mean, it's probably more than one man wants to take on himself individually. And, to have a good family dynamic is really, really a benefit to most guys.
Yeah, and people like that ground you, not only ground you down, but they ground you when you need to be grounded. And they'll say things to you that other people won't say because they have your best interests at heart. That's so critical to have a person or two who can do that.
It's a ruthless game. You think back to, and I had a pretty good run as a high school football player, having success on the field, and then, you had 6 days to enjoy it. In this sport, you have a big game, a big night. I remember probably in definition over 4,000 plus ABs. And one of my biggest games, I had a 3-homer game on Easter Sunday back in 2001. And I think to this day, I probably think that was probably my grade, including a walk-off home run. So of those 3 homers, the last homer was a walk-off. So, I mean, it's the greatest game that you could probably put together, probably the greatest game that it lasted all of about 18 hours because I was in San Diego the following day playing another game. I mean, it was funny because I was thinking about it and I still remember thinking about it on the plane flight after the game that day to San Diego. Like, you got about 2 seconds to catch your breath, and then you got to go back out there and play the next day. And thankfully, I had a decent game that day as well. But I mean, I could just as easily have gone 0 for 4, and you've already washed away the biggest game of your own personal career.
Man, never thought of that before, but that's right. You lived it. I just watched.
We wish we could go out and it's hitters anyway. The pitchers, it's different, and that's the dynamic that's so interesting that people. I really maybe I should write a book on it. The players, have this in and out daily life that is grueling and is vicious. Where the pitchers, you have to either deal with a bad performance for 5 days or a good performance for 5 days, and then make the adjustments, and then go about your business. The relievers are a little bit different, but the everyday. It's very hard not to judge yourself every day when you know that you go to work to essentially be judged.
Yeah, but if you went to the Glavin Maddox Smoltz school of we're going to go play golf,
right?
Then you get rid of your frustration that way, or hopefully get rid of your frustration that way.
It's a great joy, but see, the problem is you can't do that as a player. You don't have time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got to be there all the time. You know what? I gotta hit this because you mentioned every baseball fan has a childhood nemesis, and you mentioned mine. I am older than you. Mel Stottlemyre was my nemesis. He was for those who don't know, a tremendous pitcher for the Yankees, an ace starter in the late 60s and early 70s. I grew up a Washington Senators fan. That's how old I am. And Mel's record against the Senators, I believe, was 100-0. Now, the Senators were they had marginal years. They had one great year with Ted Williams, and they didn't. But I don't know if he ever threw anything but strikes. And to me, he never lost a game. He was not that I hated him or anything like that, but he was my childhood nemesis. No question in baseball.
Well, what a family. I mean, you had Mel Jr., who's the Marlins pitching coach. You had Todd. Todd had a great run himself.
Yeah.
He was, I competed against him in my career an awful lot. I had a lot of at-bats against Todd when he was a Cardinal. I mean, this is apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I guess.
No. It's wonderful that his family has stayed in the game because the father was a terrific pitcher and a real presence for those Yankee teams. And they were struggling at that period, too. They weren't that great. They weren't what they became later in the mid-'70s when they had the Bronx Zoo. But, damn, he was good. So were you, Todd. I'm so grateful for your time. So grateful we had the chance to do this. And I want to wish you nothing but the best this season. And hopefully we'll chat again down the road.
Sounds good, Dave. I really did appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation. Have a fantastic week. Enjoy those Marlins and spread the word.
Will do. Thank you, Todd. From Fox Sports Florida, Todd Hollandsworth joining us here. Thank you so much again, Todd. A couple more things before I run. This will be the last regularly scheduled Nooner. I've got some work coming up on the following Friday and the following Monday in the world of bowling, and I'll get more detail on that a little bit later on, but I'll be happy to be involved with Flow Bowling and the World Series of Bowling. And then the following Friday, in other words, the 18th, I'll be in a very special place to me for March Madness, a little town in the desert, 3 time zones away. And I'm going to try to do a show live from somewhere where they won't throw me out. Wish me luck with that. So again, my thanks to Todd, my thanks to you all, and I'll talk to you again from Nevada. Take care. Bye.